Welcome back to the class, everyone. We are going to be talking about roster building once again. Today, we're going to be taking a little bit of a different turn than normally. We're going to be talking about the most important Gear 13, and it's important for each team. I probably don't have every single team in here. I tried to work with all the teams that I currently used or the teams that I've used within the last 2 years. If there's another team out there, leave it in the comments. We'll try to get to it. But for the most part, this is what we're going to be dealing with. And again, this is talking about the most important, like one single character on the team that wants to be Gear 13 more than others, so you can prioritize your roster and give the right character the right tools they need to make the whole team function and to get the most bang for your buck. This video is actually inspired by a video that we made not too long ago talking about budget teams, because a lot of budget teams just kind of need one character. So again, Gear 13, we're not talking about relic levels. That is important for when we're looking at the entirety of this list. Relic levels might also apply to this, but not guaranteed, and there'll be some examples that I'll call out. So what are we looking at specifically? We're looking at what character on the team needs the stats from these 6 pieces. And what this is typically going to be, not always, but what this is typically going to be what character on your team is going to radically change the team when they get 20 speed. Because most characters, not all, but most characters, when you apply all these right side pieces here, they gain a total of 20 speed and then an extra 2 speed if they have a speed set. And we'll get into specifics of each team as we go down the list. I'm not just going to name them and get out of here. But without further ado, CLS is going to be first on our list. And the reason why we have CLS here is also the reason why we've talked about why he needs to be high relics. So this character does kind of apply. And that is going to be because of new Baka's unique here, where he takes the leadership stats and he spreads them to the entire team. So he gets 40% for himself, but he's going to give also 20% max health, max protection, offense, defense, potency, and tenacity. That's a lot of stats to the entire team. So while it's really tempting to immediately take Han right to Gear 13, especially because of the speed and mirror matches, I think CLS is going to be able to pull more weight, because when you add a stat like defense or offense, which you're adding both in this case, to the entire team, you're going to end up getting more, again, bang for your buck, and the team is going to be better overall through that one Gear 13. Next up is going to be Jedi Knight Anakin on this team. This is really one of the teams that helped inspire this whole video. Is Qui-Gon Jinn, Barriss, Ayla, Mace, or whatever other Galactic Republic Jedi, they can be dirt low. As long as Jedi Anakin is Gear 13, and again, talking about those 20 speed that is coming with that, and he's getting to, so the speed will be the same, even with the relics will be 293 or, whatever you can get to. That is going to translate into his offense because of Qui-Gon Jinn on the team being in the leader slot. He's actually getting 30 times offense times his own speed. So again, if you're getting the 20 speed, all the other stuff that comes with his Gear 13, he's going to do an incredible amount of damage, and really to the point where most of the team is immortal except Qui-Gon Jinn. Even so, like Mace, Barriss, Ayla, they can be whatever gear level they want, and they're not going to die as long as Qui-Gon Jinn is still standing, and Jedi Anakin can just kind of wreak havoc. This one's going to be a little bit different. For the 501st, we have both gas as well as 5s. And the reason why I put both of them in here is because they're both very good, and I think you're better off doing 5s if this is primarily an offensive team. And again, the reason why, he has a lot of good stats in his Gear 13, but the 20 speed in particular is going to make a huge difference if you're using it on offense because of the tactical awareness Zeta. If he's defeated, or this way, if one of the other clones dies, he transfers his max health, protection, speed, and offense stats to all of the other remaining 501st clones on the team. So you're not just putting 20 speed on, say, 5s, but it's also going to end up going to Arc, it's going to end up going to Rex, and it's end up going to Echo. I think if you're going to put this on defense, it's probably better to start with General Skywalker, just because the amount of stats he gets there makes it harder to get him down, and the AI, or not the AI, sorry, a player is going to be smart enough to go directly after 5s, and that 20 extra speed you put on him ultimately isn't going to be worth as much, whereas gas they have to go through regardless of how they play or what they think about the team. Next up is going to be Kyle Katarn. We're getting again into kind of the speed things. There is a really good turn meter loop that you can get going with Mon Mothma, and ultimately it's going to be started by Kyle Katarn. We do have an offense set on him, as you guys can see here. But when he's at a lower gear level, you almost need a speed set to get him to what I would call the magic number of 280. Again, you have to do with what you can with your mods. If it's 260, if it's 240, if it's even 220, that's fine. But as far as the team as a whole goes, he's the one you need to be prioritizing to be able to get to that higher gear level to get the 20 speed, because he's the one who's going to be starting the turn meter train because of his unique Blue Milk Run, which is a really fun name, by the way, because he's going to start the battle with 10% turn meter for each rebel fighter ally. So that's 3 on the team. He doesn't include himself because it says, I think, each other. So he's only going to be able to get 30 there. But still, you want him to be the one to get the train going. You can actually even see, I guess I kind of did this because Starkill also required him there, but he is my highest relic on the team as well. Next up is going to be Troopers, and this is where what I was talking about before about why this list is meant for Gear 13 and not for relics. Because in reality, the most important relic character here on ground is Dark. Dark is the one that you need to hit the hardest. He's the one who's going to make the difference, whether he has enough offense to take someone down immediately or not. But as far as Gear 13 goes, it's really going to be Piet and or Gideon, depending on which one you're using and how you break up your things. I personally use Gideon outside of the Trooper team. If you use him with, that's great. He's a great addition there. But he's going to be the one you're going to have at Gear 13 because of the amount of speed he gets, because he's going to be the one that, similar to Katarn and similar to a lot of characters on the list, are going to be pushing them forward. Because Troopers, if they can go first, if Piet, Gideon can get things started, they start gaining turn meter, they start just destroying the enemy team and they never get touched, and that's really how they function. That's how they end up punching up to beating really good teams like Darth Revan or even Mon Mothma herself. Next up is going to be Grievous. And with the Grievous team, it's actually going to be General Grievous himself. And this is going to be one of the few, I guess, exceptions when it comes to the Gear 13 pieces. Not because of speed, but because of the other stats. And one thing that is important, I probably should have mentioned this toward the beginning of the video, but when you have a character that is moving between gear levels, their mods, see how these have like 20% defense on this one, or this one, the health stats actually give 10% health. Those numbers right there, that 10% for the health bonus, the 16% for the primary, that is being added, if I'm not mistaken, to the last full gear level of the character. So basically what I'm saying is, if your Grievous you're using Grievous and he has 5 of his 6 Gear 12 to Gear 13 pieces, all the percentages on here are only taking into account the amount of health that he had at a full flat Gear 12. You'll still get the stats that come from those other gear pieces, and they're going to get lumped on, but you're not going to have them multiplied by these mod figures, and that is going to make a huge difference. I kept my Grievous at about R1 for a very long time, really up until I was, made to get him to R7 for General Kenobi, and the dude still made a huge difference. I think he goes to having like 60k health to 120k health just between Gear 12 and Gear 13 because of how the mods interact with that finished gear level rather than just the individual gear pieces. So hopefully that made sense. If it didn't, again, that's what the comments are for. Next up is going to be Echo. We're getting back to the idea of speed is everything. If Echo goes first, we all know this, when he uses Never Any Doubt, he's going to rip all the buffs on the enemy. He's going to give your own team turn meter, and that's just going to start a huge train that is really hard to stop, and then they just get to obliterate other teams. So very cool for Echo. Next up is going to be Daka, and again, we're pulling back, and this team actually resembles what this video is trying to do. So if you're building a roster, you have very limited resources as far as everything goes, including Gear 13. And you have a Gear 10 Talzin or lower, or Gear 12 Asajj, or what is that, a Gear 9 Talia. Daka is the one that needs to be at relics, because how the team works is both Daka and Asajj have like stacking health mechanics, and Asajj has stacking offense mechanics, and then Mother Talzin will have her plague and whatnot. Pretty much as long as old Daka doesn't die, this team can punch up and beat teams significantly better than it. We just looked at Grievous a few seconds ago, and that's one of the teams that can beat. I routinely take this team in Territory Wars to beat the full Grievous GG8 teams, because these 4 will constantly die, and then because of Daka's unique, and because we actually have her relic, she's at 130k health, I think that's good. But because of this, where she's constantly getting 10% max health every single time one of them eats it, she's going to be harder and harder to kill. And then just keep bringing back everyone. Asajj has stacking offense, Mother Talzin has plague, and you just take down the other team fairly easily. But if Daka dies, that's game. You don't get to continue that fight. You're stuck. You're done. Next up is going to be Spy. I guess we're taking quite a few characters that don't have a lot of speed on them. The reason why Spy is in here versus, say, GB, and actually, I guess we'll make this note. Geonosian Brute Alpha is going to be a better Gear 13 choice for PvE. If you're trying to beat the Acklay, he's probably the one you want to do first, especially the 20 speed, helping him get back to the event buff that gets rid of the Acklay's rage. That's pretty important. But for the most part, your Spy needs to hit as hard as possible, and the stats that he gets in his Gear 13 are going to allow that. There's a lot of stuff that Geos will beat, all depending on how hard Geonosian Spy is going to hit. So I think probably the best example of this is either Crew or Nest, where they're just really tanky characters overall, and being paper cut to death is never going to work on them. You're going to have a hit that's large enough specifically so they can go and just wipe them out entirely, and that's why Spy really comes in here instead of, everyone else. Next up is going to be the Darth Revan team. So I'll mention two in here as well. Darth Revan himself is the one that wants to be the fastest. The higher his speed you can get him, that is going to start to allow, or unallow, it's not really, prohibit is probably a better word, certain counters to go against him. Both bounty hunters and troopers, for them to really work, they need to go first. And if you have a Darth Revan, again, a Gear 12, and he's sitting at some really low speed, like 220, 240 or something like that, that's not going to help you out that much. So bumping him up first, higher up, so that he can stop that will be great. I guess it's probably worth noting, if where you're at in your GAC career, we'll call it that, your Basilisk Fallen is probably more important if you're constantly facing mirrors. We also put Malak in here just because if you want to solo with Malak, he can do things like Gear 12 and Gear 11, but it's very nice to have him at Gear 13 just to get those last few pieces. And again, not entirely similar to Grievous. When you look at all those bonuses, where he's getting, I think it's in... I was in that one where he starts to get like stacking health and health steal and stuff like that, critical avoidance, tenacity, defense, like those stats. It's nice when those have a bigger pool to take from, say Gear 13 than Gear 12. Next up is going to be First Order, so kind of the reverse of what we were talking about with Geonosians. The reason why Kylo Ren Unmasked here is the one you want, and again, it's not for speed, but because you want him as tanky as possible, because when he's at that level where he has enough health and defense, a lot of times he just can't be killed. So yeah, it is nice to have a faster Hux or a harder hitting Lobster or whatever you're trying to do here. But ultimately, if Crew can't go down, and this team just doesn't die. And there's a lot of teams that actually struggle with that. Like we talked about Geonosians, but Mon Mothma is also up there. I think Shaak Ti, depending on where you're at and what your opponent's gear levels are at, also can really struggle against it. So that's another one. Next up is going to be Bam. Bam is really important here for his... Really, it's more for his relic level, but for Gear 13 as well. He's the only damage this team really has, unless you're counting on IG 11 just melting the team with dots, which that is an option. But I like to have him, again, at Gear 13, because his birds is what's going to kill people. And as long, the team has a ton of survivability. I mean, I still have a Gear 12 IG 11 where I'm at, and that's probably not wise, but it's kind of where we're at. But the way his birds work is if once they annihilate someone and get them out permanently, and you can just kind of keep chaining that, that's how you get your kills. That's how you get people out of there. If having a different Gear 13 on the team, I guess like Queel might be an acceptable one if you're running low on speed mods and you want to get things in order. But really, it's not that hard for the rest of the team to catch up if you can get him alone there. Next up is going to be JTR herself, and the reason why is pretty darn simple, because she is going to end up being the tank, and she's actually really hard to kill, especially at Gear 13. The extra speed doesn't hurt on her as much. BB-8 and R2 are probably still going to go before just because of the 16% starting turn mirror that they get, but getting her up there so that when Finn throws his little bomb and she starts taunting is going to be a pain. Also, she's a pretty good damage dealer. They kind of reverse tanked JTR. These are fun mods that you put on her, because she is meant to do damage and you're meant to be punished by going after other characters. It's an interesting way to make a tank. It makes sense, but it's different. For Smugglers, it's going to be Dash. This one's pretty obvious for a few reasons. Not only damage-wise does he need to be hitting really hard, but again, because of the way his unique works and the way that he gives turn meter out every single time he crits someone, you want him to be going first regardless of what team he's going against. And that 20 speed that comes through the Gear 12 finisher definitely helps. I believe there's also crit chance in there, and that, again, pushes the aspect of turn meter that is going to allow Kira and L3 and Van and Young Han or whoever else is in here to go, he's going to be the one to get things started. We're going to see a similar comparison here with the Jedi, with Grandmaster Yoda and Jolee, as we did with the 501st. If you're using this team particularly on offense, I really like it to be Grandmaster Yoda. That's actually the order that I did this in first. I did him Gear 13, because you need the damage. Jedi Knight Revan is a very solid team, but once you start dipping into Gear 13 and Relics, sometimes they can lack the amount of damage that they need, because while they have quite a bit in general, they don't have any stacking damage mechanics. This was very clearly seen when we were in the Jedi Knight Revan meta, and you would have a lot of timeouts, and you needed an extra oomph and extra offense on Grandmaster Yoda. The reason why it would be Jolee on defense is because the AI is kind of dumb, and they're going to not use Grandmaster Yoda to the best ability. Jolee being tankier and tankier and tankier, that's not really a decision the AI gets to make. I guess he can waste his revive, but beyond that, it's still, I think, the more solid choice that makes the team harder to take down in general. Next up is going to be Padme. Typically, you're going to want this to be Cat, and the reason why I put GK as kind of a secondary here is just because a lot of people that have Cat have JMK. There are exceptions, obviously. I'm sure there's a few watching this video right now, so say hi in the chat for you guys as well. But typically, you're going to want to have GK just because of the amount of health and defense he's getting. And what you don't want is things that are going to be able to break through the extra protection up that he's getting through Padme. Because once he goes down, the team is fairly easily to kill. But again, using this unique, whenever someone is attacking out of turn, they're getting 40% of their max health to defend themselves. You want that to be higher and higher on GK, so that he's able to tank for the team to build courage, for the team to be able to go out and kill people. Next up is actually going to be Mara for the Empire team. Same reason as Echo, same reason as Piet. This idea of you really want the character to go first. You can see that I have her TW Omicron, because in TW, I want her to be going as fast as possible. We even have her lapped over Vader here. Vader is a very good character. He's probably the character that, again, you would want at higher relics, whereas Mara, if I had to make the decision, is going to be the first Gear 13, because she's going to be able to provide the team to all go after her, so that Vader can get a turn, that Tarkin can get a turn, everyone will get a turn, as long as Mara gets a turn, and she gets the turn meter on the team going with her 2 AoEs that work really well. Next up is going to be Boss. This is, again, another example where the best relic on the team is Fennec. Fennec is the top damage dealer, but if you're looking at just taking a character to Gear 13, I would definitely go Bosk first out of everyone here, just because, again, if you're wanting the turn meter train on your team to get started, he's really the one that gets it going with Predator instincts. And then if you're doing this correctly, your Grief will go right after, do the mass assist, your Mando will crit. Mine is Gear 12 here. It's got some fun pieces, and I think I actually have his finisher, just because it have like a lot of, yeah, it had a lot of crit chance or something like that, and I was like, that's really the stat I need the most. But anyways, so we would go in with Mando next. You would crit on both those AoEs, or not the AoEs, the mass assists, and that'll allow you to gain turn mirror, and then Mando will annihilate someone. It's also nice to have the tank at Gear 13, just because they'll be able to tank more. I mean, again, you have an insta-kill, and Fennec as well. You probably don't need much more damage via that way. For the Maul team, it's going to be Maul, pretty plain and simple. There might be a good argument for armor if you get, depending on how you need to line things up for him to take his 2 turns immediately. He's the damage dealer, and again, similar to Malak, one of the nice things that he has going on in his kit with Seething Rage is he can use this attack 5 times in a row if he has 5 stacks of Anguish. And when you start to build up either his relic level or his Gear 13 or whatever it is, you're not just gaining offense on that one hit, but you're gaining it on all 5. And it's something that's going to start to compound on him as a character. Next up is going to be, we're starting to dip into teams that I don't have the Gear 13, but it's going to be Scion for the Darth Traya team. Nihilus is actually, the way his kit is built, he can kind of stay, you want him higher, but he can stay low for a while because he gains 30% max health. What is it? Every single time someone's inflicted with a debuff. Yeah, Darth Scion or Darth Traya. So he gets super tanky, super fast. He can wait. Scion, you want him to go first against certain teams like Geo so that he can get his AoE off and then they all get kind of stuck behind him. But also you want him to tank everything because the second he goes down, Traya doesn't do too hot herself, and taking her to Gear 13 right away doesn't end up doing a whole lot for you because she'll still die to a lot of stuff. Again, coming into a team that I don't have a Gear 13, but if I had to pick one Gear 13 on this team, it would probably be Stormtrooper, just because he gets much more immortal once you start getting, like, this is already, like, that's a decent protection for a Gear 12. I would love to be able to apply all this stuff, get this health, get this armor, get the resistance, get the health steal. The again, the armor that he has on here, the speed is helpful, but it's mostly overall for these massive amounts of survivability, because he can be really hard to kill, especially on offense if Mon Mothma or CLS or something just gets stuck behind him. And realistically, I would like to have Death too. I would like to have Iden herself, the whole team. And it's I have a really love-hate relationship with the gear level of Iden, because she does so much under geared, but at the same time, I know that I can do even more. So, and last but not least, we're gonna kind of have our plug and plays. You could probably add Gideon to this list too. I didn't, just because we mentioned him in Troopers previously, but Savage, Wampa, and Wat Tambor, these are all characters that if you can, push them to gear 13, just because they're at raw extra stats that these two can use, and then Wat will get even closer to be able to put in his second tech out immediately as soon as the battle starts. So again, good gear 13 choices. So that is going to be it for today's video. Let me know if you see any like clauses or anything like, oh, actually with this team, a gear 13 is better here, or if there's another team. We did leave out a few that are just like Malgus and Starkiller, not because they're bad teams, obviously not, but because Starkiller, you pretty much are gonna have all those relics by the time you even get to that team. So the question of gear 13 isn't really that applicable. But thank you guys for watching. Remember to like and subscribe, and as always, stay awesome.